What I wanted to let you know for the meditation instruction, just a brief overview of what we'll be doing. This session this evening will include, what we do in this serene reflection meditation tradition, what we do with our minds, the mind of meditation. And we will do a detailed overview also of the postures. The postures in our tradition, we spend quite a bit of time going over those because the posture really helps with the mind of meditation. And then we'll go over just really briefly etiquette and walking meditation, and also we'll have plenty of time for questions. So my thought is that I'll go ahead and do the instruction, and if you can hold your questions to the end, and we'll definitely have plenty of time to do that. So, and I will just maybe start by saying if there are pauses or technological blips, please forgive us. There'll be some maneuvering of the camera around when we're doing the demonstration of the postures, that kind of thing. So what is the purpose of meditation? I think for everyone it's something a little bit different, but what I see the purpose of meditation is that it opens us up to our inherent Buddha nature and helps us to know true peace of heart. So meditation is really an expression of our Buddhahood, and to meditate is to manifest that Buddhahood. The former abbot of one of our temples overseas, he wrote about meditation. He said, "To meditate is to do nothing. You don't need to express anything, ask for anything, or reject anything. The work of meditation is to free yourself from doing all these things and to release yourself from a whole load of mental investments and projections at the same time." So the practice we do here at the Abbey is serene reflection meditation, also known as shikantaza, which literally means just sitting. That means that as a practice, we would not generally do mantras or do koan study or counting the breath, just the practice of sitting. Our abbess here, Reverend Master Mann, she says the practice we do here is simple, but it's not easy because we don't have the general, we're not generally using koans or mantras. The meditation instruction I'm giving you is this very same meditation that I learned when I was at the very beginning as well. I think what's interesting about that is we're all doing exactly the same practice. There's no kind of secret initiation to some type of higher meditation. So I'm going to give you really everything tonight in the practice that we do. So when I sit down, just a moment here. So when I sit down to meditate, what I do is, I start by taking 2 deep breaths. This helps with the circulation of the spiritual energy. And then I just begin breathing normally. I'm not doing anything fancy with my breathing, and that's really important in our tradition. I'm not trying to have a blank mind, and I'm definitely not trying to stop thoughts from arising. The brain is just seen really as another sense organ, and it's going to spit out whatever it's going to spit out during meditation, and so we're not trying to suppress that. If you have the chance to come here, one of the scriptures that we recite during the day is Rules for Meditation, and I think one of the most important lines in the Rules for Meditation from Great Master Dogen, he says, "Just sitting with no deliberate thought is the important aspect of serene reflection meditation." So I want to just kind of point out the difference here between deliberate and natural thought when we're doing our meditation. So if I'm sitting there, I've taken my 2 deep breaths and I'm sitting in my meditation spot, and I hear a dog bark outside, the brain recognizes that a dog has barked, and that's a natural thought. As soon as I start to think about the dog barking, that becomes deliberate thought. If I can just allow that dog barking, to be there without engaging in that, that remains natural thought. Anytime we have thoughts arise during meditation, that's what's going to happen. Thoughts are going to arise no matter what. But as soon as we engage with them, as soon as we start thinking, oh, I need to order the such and such, I mean, you know when you've started down that rabbit hole, and the sooner that you can catch yourself doing that and just bring yourself back to taking a couple of breaths, 2 deep breaths, back to just basically just sitting in the body, then that's how I would bring my mind back from meditation when the mind wanders, when it gets into this realm of deliberate thought. So when the thoughts arise, as much as I can, I try not to engage with it. I just allow that thought to be there. And sometimes it's a feeling, and sometimes it's emotion. Those things will just arise naturally. I don't try to deliberately push the thought out of my mind. If I allow the thought to be there, or the feeling or emotion, without grasping after it, without pushing it away, because in a sense, that's the same thing, the grasping and the pushing, eventually it will pass. And that's what we're doing in meditation over and over. And it sounds a little bit funny. It's like in our tradition, it's actually kind of hard to tell you exactly what we're doing with our mind, because in a sense, it's what we're not doing with our mind. And this is why I said that the practice is simple but not easy. We give this basic instruction: allow the thoughts to arise, try not to engage with them, allow them to arise, abide, and pass. And we do this over and over and over again. I think a really good example of this analogy with the thought arising is to look at what I would do with an itch, because if an itch arises, it's exactly the same as what I do when a thought arises. So when the itch arises, the same thing. I'm trying not to engage with the itch, and maybe some of you will have had this experience before. If you immediately scratch the itch, it'll likely come back in some form. If I can just be still with it, just to not focus on it completely, just allow it to be there, normally it'll arise, abide, and pass. Occasionally, if it's there like for a really long time, I might scratch that itch, but what I try to do as much as possible is just to allow that to be there, and it'll dissolve on its own. So this is the same thing that we're doing with our thoughts, just here in the itch form. When we sit down to meditate, it's quite common to have old memories, maybe resentments, that type of thing arise, and it's exactly the same. So if I take the example of the resentment, if I have a resentment that's been around for a while, it might rear its head during meditation, and as soon as I engage with that resentment, somehow the energy that I'm putting into that, it adds a little bit to it every time I kind of churn over it. And that resentment actually, it gradually builds up steam. However, in meditation, if those things arise, if I can just allow it to be there without feeding it, and I don't know if that makes sense, but without engaging in it, with it, without thinking, yeah, that person really did me wrong, or whatever it is that we're upset about, very gradually, drop by drop, just being with that resentment every time it arises allows us to very, very gradually just work on dissolving that. And it may take a very long time for some things to actually dissolve, to pass, really. But in essence, that's the work that we're doing in meditation. So whether it's painful things and sometimes even happy things, those things will arise too. But I also am not spending my meditation period engaging with, that wonderful thing that happened last week. I'm just trying to be still with whatever it is that comes up, no matter what that thing is. So as soon as I find myself, really engaging with that, getting into deliberate thought, as soon as I notice that I'm doing that, I bring my mind back to taking a couple of breaths and just remaining grounded in the body as much as I can. I notice that here I am sitting in the body. If you're really having a hard time with this kind of basic instruction, which, like I said, is not always easy for people, it is okay to follow your breath for a little bit, but eventually we have to let go of that and just be just sitting. The Shikantaza, or serene reflection practice that we do. And of course, it may be the case that some of you have been long-time meditators, so this won't be anything new to you. And what I would encourage you to do is, if you're interested in trying this practice, because it could be quite different from what you're used to, just giving it a try and just seeing what it's like for a little bit, and just giving it a shot. For some people, it can be quite different. We meditate with our eyes open, not completely open, but about halfway open. We allow our gaze to be about several feet in front of us on the wall or on the floor, and that's different. And just breathing normally through the nose. The other way I like to explain what we're doing in serene reflection meditation, the founder of our first abbess of Shasta Abbey, Master G. Kennett, she was very fond of using this freeway analogy, and which is quite apt because the monastery, we're not that far from the I-5, so we hear the freeway quite often, especially if we're out on a walk. So what she used to say is, it's as if we're sitting, beneath the freeway during meditation. When we're sitting there in meditation, the cars passing overhead are just like our thoughts. And so during meditation, we don't leave our sitting place and get into one of those cars and drive all the way down the road. We just allow the cars to pass back and forth, the thoughts to pass back and forth. You might hear the cars, you might hear the dogs barking, you hear all those kind of natural things, but we don't engage with those cars. We don't engage with those thoughts. We just allow them to go back and forth. And if you find that you've gotten into one of the cars and you're halfway down the road, as soon as you realize you've done that, you get out of the car and you go back to your sitting place. So I like that analogy a lot because it's a good, I think, good visual for what we're actually doing in our meditation practice. So I mentioned this, that the meditation that we do here at the monastery, it's not done in stages. It's the same in the beginning, the middle, and the end. So it's the very same practice I'm doing now. I've been doing for, I guess, almost 20 years, I think. So we're giving you the whole thing, nothing left out. I think it's really important in meditation to try to cultivate a bright mind, accepting of what comes up. When we sit down to meditate, we're opening ourselves to that, so to whatever arises, good and bad, and that can be the difficult aspect, right? To just be okay with whatever it is that arises. So if it's difficult emotions, memories, joy, just allowing everything that arises to arise naturally and pass as much as we can. And I wanted to say that this meditation practice is not just for one type of person. It's not just for the young. It's not just for the old. It's for any gender. It's for any person. You don't need any special equipment. You can do it really in any place. So for the monastic community, for the lay community, for anyone actually. So I mentioned this at the beginning that people meditate for a variety of reasons. Some people will are seeking enlightenment experiences. Some people want to lower their blood pressure. But ultimately, you know, our meditation, it can help us to know a peace of mind and heart, which we can know for ourselves unconditionally. So really, you know, when it comes down to it, I sit for the sake of sitting, not to achieve anything. And that can be kind of a hard one to let go of. But as much as I can, I try not to have expectations of what my meditation will bring. And that brightness of mind and openness is, I think, just so beneficial for any type of meditation practice, not having expectations. And the last thing I wanted to say just in this section is the importance of not judging our meditation. There is a difference between meditation and concentration. Some people are naturally very good at concentrating, which is great. You may sit down to meditate and find that your mind just wanders all the time, and that's okay. There's something within us that responds to the meditation, that opens naturally, even when the mind is wandering. And so I think it's really, really important not to judge that. And I always say, how can we actually know what's a good meditation period or not? And you know, especially if we don't have expectations for what's going to happen. What I know for myself is that when I began meditating, I was a deeply, deeply, deeply unhappy person. And the meditation, just the steady practice of it over, you know, these 20 years has very, very gradually, you know, shifted my life completely around. And you can't say, oh, it was definitely this, or it was this one meditation session. It was the 5 minutes one day, and it was the 6 minutes the next day. It was that steady practice of meditation over the course of a long period of time that made a huge difference in my life. And I think that ultimately helped me to know a fundamental piece of heart, which is there, which we can all know for ourselves, especially in this time where the world seems to be in such a strange place and we're all going through this pandemic. To be able to be still and to be at peace, no matter what's going on around us. It doesn't mean we're not affected by what's going on, because we are, but there's something within us that is unmoved by the craziness of the world. And that's what we can come to know for ourselves through the practice of meditation. The Buddha described 4 meditation postures in the sutras for meditation. He talked about standing, sitting, walking, and lying down. I will say that learning the postures, it really helps to facilitate the right attitude of mind for meditation. Sitting meditation is the best posture for formal meditation. But I would say that the most important aspect is learning to get your back in the right position. Now, if you have some kind of back injury, of course, you know, we're not asking you to twist yourself into a pretzel. We're trying to show you different sitting postures today that can possibly work, you know, that you can use at home. So I would say to start that, you know, most people should be able to sit in a chair. So that's why I'm going to start with the chair sitting posture. Here's where you can follow along if you like. If you start by sitting on your hands for a moment, you know, the best thing is you can see the chair that Aruna has a nice flat seat. It's much better if you have a chair with a flat seat or like a piano bench. That's the ideal. But sit on your hands for a second. You can feel your sits bones, which is really the lowest part of the pelvis. To sit up straight without strain, these bones need to be supported in such a way that the pelvis is tipped slightly forward. So this allows the back to assume a slight inward curve in the lumbar region and the upper body, and shoulders to be comfortable with the chest open. Now, if you slump back into the chair, cue slumping, you feel how your sits bones rotate. And if you sit far forward on the seat, again, the sits bones will rotate away from the center of your hands. So you want the sits bones to be centered in whatever posture you adopt. That's really the important aspect. So it can be on a chair, it can be on the floor, whether you're sitting on a bench or whether you're sitting on a meditation cushion. So Arunima has a wedge sitting to the side of her, which she's going to show you. So at the monastery, we have these wedge-shaped cushions. Can you show the profile on it? Which naturally puts your back and your sits bones into the position we're looking for meditation. And the idea with this cushion is that you're sitting just on the front third of it, not all the way back. Do you want to go ahead and sit on it? These cushions, I mean, they're pretty. I mean, I got one cut at a foam shop before, before I came, before when I was living in the city. But they can fairly easily be ordered online as well if you're interested in such a piece of equipment. And if you don't have access to something like this, it doesn't mean that you can't sit on a chair. It's also fine to use the tip of a smaller cushion or a smaller pillow would be okay, and maybe even like a towel. That's a possibility of something you could roll up like that. But again, you only want to sit on the forward part of it, not all the way to the back. So that's the chair. One thing I would say is don't force the lumbar area inwards too much. Do you want to point to that area, Arunima? If the chair is too high, this may happen. So just making sure that you're sitting on a relatively reasonable chair. If you're not so tall, you could consider putting something under your feet also to lift yourself up, so that your lumbar region isn't forced in too much. Relax the abdomen as much as possible when you're sitting. Some people get a lot of tension in their stomach or in their shoulders. I tend to get a lot of tension in my shoulders, sometimes even in my face. When I notice my shoulders getting tight, I don't force my shoulders back. What I do instead is I very slightly lift the chest up. And to me, that's the solution for getting the shoulders in the right position. So the hand posture for meditation is you want to put your dominant hand under your non-dominant hand. So if you're right-handed, put it underneath your left hand. And if you're left-handed, vice versa, with the thumbs touching lightly. So the thumbs are not pressed together really firmly. They're just lightly pressing together. And just in your lap, you rest your hands. If your arms are on the shorter side, you can put something underneath your hands, a hand cushion, a rolled up towel, anything like that that can support you. Especially if you're having shoulder pain, that's a good indication that the posture might not be quite right for your arms. So that can really help relieve stress or pain in your shoulders. I mentioned about the hand posture. What's interesting is during meditation, just pay attention also to what your thumbs are doing. If you notice your thumbs are drooping, you're probably sleepy. So it's a kind of a good indication, just to kind of bring your attention back to the meditation. And if the thumbs are up and really kind of hardly pressed together, you're probably also having a lot of tension. So I just often use the thumbs as a good indicator of what's going on with my meditation period. So I mentioned we sit with our eyes half open, kind of at about a 45-degree angle
not focusing on any particular spot, and we sit facing the wall instead of facing each other. So that's different from some other traditions. What I'll say to start with about the cross-legged postures is that they can be helpful for some people, but they're definitely not essential. And this is one of the reasons I mentioned that our meditation is for everyone, is for old and young, you know, any gender, any person of any background, because you don't have to sit on the floor to be a good meditator. You can sit in a chair and be a very good meditator. So the one thing about sitting on the floor is, for some people, it helps to create a greater sense of groundedness, but again, not essential. So I'm going to have Arima demonstrate some of the floor postures. We'll go through those quickly, and we'll talk very briefly about walking meditation, and then we'll have lots of time for questions. That's perfect where it is. Yeah. Sure. So you can see that, you know, Arunima's got a zafu or meditation cushion, again, easily obtained. If you don't have one, you can use a smaller pillow, or Arunima was mentioning she even used a rolled up beach towel when she was meditating back home. When you're sitting on the zafu or the cushion, again, if you want to sit kind of towards the front of the cushion. If you sit too far back, it will cut off the circulation in your legs. Sitting on the front gives your pelvis the necessary forward tilt, and helps to prevent your legs from falling asleep. If your legs are falling asleep, that's probably an indication, yeah, that one of your nerves is getting pinched. That may not be the best posture for you if that's happening a lot. So it looks, Arima, you're sitting in Burmese. So she's sitting in the Burmese position. And can you turn to face the camera to show people your leg position? So her legs are, her feet are both on the mat. One leg tucked in and the other just in front. And this is a more accessible floor posture for most people. The half lotus position is a slight tweak on that, with the one foot up on the thigh. And then the full lotus, which I'm not going to make Arunima demonstrate, is both feet. I generally don't recommend the full lotus position for new people unless you have a very strong yogic background. You've been doing yoga for a long time, or maybe you've been a gymnast, or you're extremely flexible. For most people, it's not necessarily the best posture to adopt. The Burmese is much more accessible. What you'll see with her Burmese position, though, is that it has 3 points of contact. Both knees are touching the ground or touching the mat, as well as, you know, her tailbone. So it creates this very stable posture. If you find that one of your knees is up in the air, if it's up dramatically in the air, I would, you can try putting something underneath it, like a small pillow. One thing to note is that if you're not used to sitting on the floor, starting with shorter periods of meditation and building up with that posture, it's possible that you would be able to sit on the floor for longer periods. But the Burmese is a good one to start with, unless you're, you know, really comfortable with, you know, those with the half lotus or full lotus position. The one thing I wanted to mention in our tradition is we never recommend sitting in meditation for longer than 45 minutes. That's the maximum time we would sit in meditation. But the really important thing here is if you are adopting a floor position, you have to make a point of switching whichever leg is in front, either halfway during the meditation period or every other meditation period. If you sit with one leg in front and the other back continuously, over time it'll tweak your spine. So we know this from experience. So we make a point of mentioning this in order to keep things in alignment. So that's a really important thing to note. So the last posture for the floor we're going to show you is using a bench. So this is sometimes known as sitting in seiza position in Japanese. You can see that the bench, just like the wedge, has that slight angle on it, and it allows you to sit comfortably on the floor, again with your sits bones centered, not rotated front or back. In that position, it gives a nice stable support to your meditation. This is also a really accessible posture for many people. And, you know, if anyone likes to work with wood, this is a very simple thing to make on one's own. One thing I will say about sitting on a bench is if you sit on a bench that's too high, it can push your pelvis too far forward, you know, making the lumbar curve too great, which can cause damage. So again, you want to be careful not to sit on something too high. The main complaint I find for people who sit on a bench is they find that they definitely need a hand cushion, something in their lap, because their hands tend to slide forward. So this is a case where I would probably recommend for most people to have a rolled hand towel just to put in their lap for doing the meditation that way. So the last thing, Aruna, if you want to show us how we do walking meditation, between periods of meditation, if you come to the monastery or if you want to adopt this at home, we'll do a period of meditation with walking meditation in between, and then we'll often go back to sitting. And what we do is we put our hands in shashu with the right hand, you can see, or you've got your left hand in a fist and the other hand on top, and just at the sternum there. And for walking meditation, we actually do it pretty slowly, just kind of a half step at a time. And again, with the eyes gazing downward, we're just giving our bodies a chance to move before resuming sitting on the floor. So at an introductory retreat, what we often do is 20 minutes of sitting meditation, 5 minutes of walking meditation, and then back to sitting meditation before the morning dawn drum goes. So I think that that's basically it in terms of instruction for what we're doing with our minds and the postures. And Aruna, thank you very much.